And good morning, everybody. Spin Ventures here live from Dade Battlefield Historic State Park here in Bushnell, Florida. Today is a history lesson about the battle in Bushnell, Brooksville, Florida, and how it is between the colonization of the Americans and Native American and Indian War. The Native American Indian War back in 1822. So, before we head in, I got a few facts about Dade Battlefield, where our location is today, and this is what I found online, and of course in Google. But on actually the history of the state park, it said that after Florida became a U.S. territory in 1822, influx of settlers created increasing friction with the Seminole Indians, who had long called their area home. The Seminole practice of giving refuge fugitive slaves added to the tension. By the 1830s, this conflict had risen to the boiling point, with signing of Treaty of Payne's Landing in 1832. Several chiefs of the Seminole Indians, relocation of the people west of the Mississippi Indian Territory, in present day in now what is called Oklahoma. But many Seminoles refused to go. Faced with the prospect of being forced by the federal government to move, Seminoles opposed to the treaty decided to fight for their homes. So, on December 28th of 1835, 107 officers, men under the command of Brevet Major Francis Langhorne Dade, was en route from Fort Brooke on Tampa Bay to reinforce the garrison at Fort King in present-day Ocala, about 50 miles short of their destination. That's correct, because from here to Ocala is 50 miles. About that, maybe 45. They were attacked by 180 Seminole warriors in a pine forest in present day Bushnell, which is where we're at now. And then in 1835 was the battle of Bushnell. Battle of Bushnell in 1835. It sent shockwaves across the nation. It started the Second Seminole War, the longest and most costly American Indian War in U.S. history. In 1921, the Florida legislature appropriated funds for the preservation of the battle site as a memorial of the Second Seminole War. So, we are about to go locate where the Second Seminole War battle took place here in Bushnell at Dade's Battlefield. But first, into the visitor center so we could get some more information and history on what actually happened at the Battle of Bushnell at Dade's Battlefield. Let's go. Alright, so here are some of the Seminole crafts that the Seminole Indians women sewed together in the different clothing options for men, women, and children of the Seminole Indians. They even wove baskets to keep food, accessory items, and needs while in their villages. And here, this is the Dade Battlefield Historic State Park, preserving and interpreting Florida's rich history for more than a century. It was established in September of 1921 in Bushnell, Florida. So we mark our way through. This is like an old document book. This is very cool. somebody from Vermont, Virginia Beach, Leesburg, Virginia, Randolph, New Hampshire, New England, Weekly Watching, that's the White newspaper, and then Little Rock, Arkansas, on the 17th, so yesterday. Seat of War. They're just some little things that you could purchase. Cookbook, Gourmet Gator Cookbook. Wildlife, learn about the wildlife, learn about the butterfly gardens. This is part of the last hours of Dade's battle. And this is some of the map. This is the Seat of War map where they strategized different landmarks and different it's a better picture where they had each of the army's positions over like through different lakes and over here, and strategized where they want to set up the weapons. And then here it was 100 miles. I only rode about 100 miles from Fort Brooke to Fort King. That's where they traveled. Fort King is here in Bushnell, and from Fort and here's the video where they would have a video, but it's not on right now. So we have a picture of the Seminole Indians riding into battle. Ransom Clark, this man, he was a private, 2nd Regiment of Artillery, fought on December 28th of 1835. Terribly wounded, he made his painful way back to Fort Brooke in Tampa. No longer able to serve, he was discharged and returned to his hometown in Greggsville, New York. He married, he had a daughter. For his family, he wrote and talked of this battle until his wounds finally overcame him in 1840. That's where he died of his wounds. This stone placed over his grave was replaced in 2003 by Dade Battlefield and Veterans Administration. So Ransom Clark, he's actually buried. His original headstone is displayed at the History Center in Tampa. Minor for courage and endurance. Alright. Oh, so this is that one. More history. Alright, so we're going to run through this rather quickly because I don't want to be boredom of everybody. So we're showing you pictures. These are just pictures of the I think they reenact the battle somewhere, but well, here, I don't know when though, but these are just some of the pictures from the battle that took place here. And of course, we start in 1800. The first Seminole War, conflict between American settlers and Seminole War. In 1818, Andrew Jackson, who was the U.S. president at the time, violated the Spanish territory of Florida in order to control the Seminoles. This invasion is supposedly a self-defense against a savage foe, developed into a determined project by Andrew Jackson to take Florida from Spain. See, there's the Seminole Indian leader. And it's just some of the pictures. This is kind of the map that they took. Went on from Fort Scott.
I got a little video if you'd like to see it. Okay.
from Fort Scott and then made its way into, took a battle. Battle was right here, just in Georgia. This is present day Georgia right here. A battle took place right here. Of course, as we march into the fort, one of the forts down near, well, Pensacola is way over here, and Fort Barrancas. And there was a battle took place just off the coast, and Fort, and then went through present day Tallahassee, which would be right in this area. And this was back in Spanish Florida, St. Mark's, which they traveled down here to Bowlegstown, and then this is the Battle of. This is where we're at now. Well, no, we're not here. This is on the Panhandle. Of course, then you got, of course, Florida finally becomes a territory in 1821. It was transformed from Spain to the United States in 1821 after years of negotiation. Approximately 5,000 Indians living in Florida when the territory was open to settlers. Of course, here, got the treaty. They were finally, this guy's trying to make a treaty between the American and the Seminole Indians. And by 1830, prelude to war, reservation for the Seminoles created a Moultrie Creek Treaty did not end the friction between them and the settlers. Severe drought and food shortages forced the Indians to wander from their reservation in search of food. Additionally, runaway slaves slowly living with the Seminoles created more problems. As a result, conflicts, whites desired for reservation lands, settlers petitioned Washington removal of Indians from Florida. So Andrew Jackson had had enough of the settlers, of the Seminole Indians, refusing to leave. Therefore, in Washington, D.C., Andrew Jackson forced the Indians out of Florida. Seminoles. Spring of 1835, the governor began to send soldiers and Indian agents to effect the removal of the Seminoles. However, many tense meetings, Indian agent Wiley Thompson concluded that only force induced the Seminoles to move. As the year progressed, Indian unrest and violence escalated. Stage was set for general warfare. Then by December 28th of 1835, the battle had begun here in Bushnell. Seminole chiefs had made plans to strike at the U.S. military force in Florida and to kill Indian agent at Fort King. Major Dade's march from Fort Brooke to Fort King afforded the Seminoles the opportunity to attack a military force and show strength. Intermingled with the plan to attack the U.S. troop was Osceola's desire for revenge against the Indian agent, Wiley Thompson, who had humiliated him. Osceola intended to kill the agent and lead an attack against Major Dade's forces. Osceola's desire for revenge ultimately prevented him from being present at the attack on Dade. Troops under command of Reverend Major Francis Longhorn Dade were attacked on December 28th of 1835 on the military road 30 miles from their final destination of Fort King. Open country gave the troops a false sense of security, and the Indians carefully watched their entire march for 5 days. Took the troops by surprise. The musket tool. That's Flintlock's musket right here. Of course, here we got the map. Small pine woods and palmettos.
On the cold morning of December 28, 1835, the command of Major Francis Langhorne Dade was marching from Fort Brooke to reinforce Fort King. On the sixth day, the detachment had traveled about 4 miles when they passed a small pond lying off to their right. Suddenly, the sparse pine and palmetto forest seemed to explode with gunfire. The soldiers were caught completely by surprise, and more than half the command was cut down by the first volley of shots. The Indians had planned their ambush well. They had the soldiers outflanked before firing the first shot. Each Seminole warrior was protected by a tree or hidden in the high palmettos. Quickly, the survivors began to return the fire with a 6-pound cannon, which soon frightened the Indians into withdrawing. During the lull, the soldiers quickly cut pine trees and began building a crude rectangular fortification against the next attack, which they knew would come soon. The structure was only 3 logs high when the Seminoles launched their second attack. For several hours, soldiers returned the fire, but soon ammunition for the 6-pounder was exhausted. Now the persistent firing of the Indians began to take its toll. At last, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, with the stench of burned powder hanging heavily in the air, the firing ceased. Thinking that all the soldiers were dead, the Indians withdrew to celebrate their victory. There were, however, 3 men who, though severely wounded, were overlooked. 2 of them managed to return to Fort Brooke, but only one lived to tell of the events which took place here on that fateful day of December 28, 1835.
And then after the battle was over, 105 military men lay in positions at which they had fallen. 54 days later, General Gaines arrived upon the scene with 1,100 men and buried the fallen with military honors. Officers were placed in single grave outside of breastwork, while the enlisted men were buried in mass graves inside the log structure. The bodies remained here until 1842, when they were transferred by army to a military cemetery in St. Augustine. This is the pictures of what remained. Although I don't really think they were skeletons, but they just laid the bodies laid where they died. 3 pyramid monuments were built in honor of the officers, privates, and non-commissioned officers of command of Reverend Major Francis Dade, when they were buried in St. Augustine on September 10, 1842, in the National Cemetery. These are the rifles, the bullets, buttons, lead shots, part of container. Mr. Ransom Clark, only survivor of Major Dade's ill-fated command in Florida. He was the only survivor who was severely wounded, like on the brink of dying, where he survived. And the survivors of the Dade's command was Private John Thomas, Private Edwin D. Kersey, Private Joseph Sprague, Private Ransom Clark, and Luis Pacheco. Micanopy, although the hereditary head chief of the Seminoles, Micanopy was not as active as other chiefs in the fight against the U.S. Army in 1837. He was seized under a flag of truce by General Jessup and sent to St. Augustine in the spring of 1838. He was put aboard the brig Homer and shipped west. Jumper or Oti Emethea. Alligator or Halatusticunugi. I apologize if I mispronounced those names. Those are Indian names. This was the Second Seminole War of 1835 to 1842. The killing of Major Dade and his company marked the beginning of the most costly of the nation's Indian Wars, the Second Seminole War. The war lasted almost 7 years, cost the lives of 1,500 soldiers and volunteers, an unknown number of Indians, and drained the federal treasury of $40 million. By the end of the Second Seminole War, the majority of Seminoles were either killed in battle, dead due to exhaustion, or shipped to present-day Oklahoma. Approximately 300 Seminoles remained in Florida's wilderness after the military called an end to the fight in 1842. But although the remaining Indians kept the swamps and other areas unoccupied by whites, The pressure on them never ceased until finally another war was ignited in 1855. And now we roll on into the aftermath of the Second Seminole War. After it ended, most of the Seminoles, 3,824, had shipped west. Agonizing struggle extending through a period of 23 years had last terminated in the ruin and destruction of gallant Seminole. Florida had become a state finally in 1845. Periodic small skirmishes occurred between U.S. forces and Indians, but in general, early 1850s there was little contact between Florida settlers and Indians who stayed deep in the swamps of Florida. Alright, so we are actually walking through the battle site right now, and it's actually pretty chilly outside. It's only 62 degrees, which is cold. It's cool for Florida, for the state, and so we're walking around with the snow picking up artifacts along the trail. So we're walking through the battle site. I don't know if there's going to be any signs, considering the fact that we just read most of the story of the battle inside in the visitor center, and I'm kind of glad that they renovated it, but who knows, they may have some stuff out here like landmarks and locations of the battle, of the like landmarks where each section of the battle was. So we'll find out here shortly where exactly we go. Oh, this is okay. So these are where, alright, we've found our first here. Lieutenant Mudge fell. So, soldier in combat fell at this area right here when they were, like I said, we were walking literally right in the middle of the battlefield right now. And so here's the first of the lieutenants that fell in battle in the Second Seminole War. Second phase of the battle lasted until about 2 p.m. Most of the force of 108 men had been killed. The wounded were dispatched by the enemy after the battle ended, with the exception of 3 members of Major Dade's force who survived the attack and returned to Fort Brooke. Chief Alligator, the Seminole leader, claimed that only 3 of his warriors were killed and only 5 were wounded. On to our next fallen soldier, fallen man, just up ahead. And this is where Captain Fraser fell. Lieutenant, not a lieutenant, but he was a captain that fell into the in the battle. Was right here. And this plaque said that the scene of ambush remained deserted for 7 weeks. Finally, on February 20th, 1836, an expedition under General Gaines arrived here, identified the bodies, and gave them proper burial with military rites, placing officers' bodies on the east side of the trail and enlisted men in 2 graves within the redoubt. The small cannon was retrieved from a nearby pond, which the Seminoles had thrown it. They mounted it muzzle down, and as a monument to the dead. Almost 6 years later, on August 15, 1842, officers and men of the Army contributed funds to pay for a second straight interment, and Dade's silent command now rests in the National Cemetery at St. Augustine. That's why I went to St. Augustine last year, because there's so much history with American history and war, and here in world history. And here, Major Dade is where Major Dade fell. The city is named after this man. This is where he fell, right almost at the front entrance of the park. It's there we go. And so it's where he fell, right here. And I think this is the end of the trail. I think. Surely there's more. I'm gonna keep moving. Then suddenly, men reeled and fell to a deadly fire poured upon them from behind the trees, palmettos. Half of Major Dade's command lay dead or wounded. Major Dade and Captain Fraser were killed nearby. 3 of the 6 surviving officers were wounded. Those men remaining after the first onslaught sought cover from which they might return the fire. After several rounds from their cannon, the Indians withdrew a short distance. The soldiers hastily threw together a low redoubt of logs, cared for their wounded, and collected ammunition from the fallen. And then the battle of Bucknell, Brooksfield, had ended. Alright, so we made it out of the loop and onto big open field area. I'm wondering if some of these are either mounds or if they're gravestones, because they look, when I walked past them earlier, they looked like they were gravestones as part of the battle, but I don't think they are. I think they're just anthills. So I don't want to touch these. Yeah, these are anthills. These are not gravestones. But wait, these are graves. Yeah. Here. The Florida Park Service recognizes and appreciation the Dade Battlefield Society of Volunteer Seminole and Soldier Reenactors for their support of their annual presentation of the Dade Battle Reenactment. Presented on the 20th annual reenactment, December 30th and 31st, 2000. So this is where the reenactment battle took place, right here. So why are there ant mounds here? This is where the battle took place, reenactment, not the real battle, but the reenactment battle between the Seminole War. So right here, this is it. All through here, back through there, down the hill, and head back towards the visitor center. Make our next approach towards our next stop, which I don't know where it's going to be, but we will see you all when we get there, and thank you guys for joining me here on this historic battlefield tour at Dade's Battlefield Historic National Park in Bushnell, Florida. We will see you all on the next spin venture, and also shortly as we make our way back towards Tampa, but gonna stop in Wesley Chapel, just about 30 miles down the road from here, to see a good friend of mine whom I haven't seen in a while, and I'll make our presence known. Gonna stop there, probably get food anyway. I'm getting hungry. We're gonna head on through there and make our way back towards Tampa. So we'll see you guys shortly on this Spin Venture. Be sure to subscribe to Spin Ventures. Drop a like on the video if you like American and world history, or even social studies things, especially historical landmarks, state parks, anything that has to do with the past, or just exploring. Drop a like in the video, leave comments down below. Subscribe to Spin Ventures. We'll see you all on the next Spin Venture.